They boast the most Champions League wins for any country. They have three European championships and could win a fourth this weekend. One World Cup, and every single good footballer you can think of has spent either Spanish or has spent some time in Spain. But why is Spanish football so good? So if you were to name countries that are all you'd expect to be good at World Cups, Euros, at football in general, I mean you always think of first because country you come to mind is Brazil, and then you think of like Argentina. I mean England, even though they haven't won anything since 1966, but it's their national game and they're home of the Premier League, and France, but yeah, and then Spain, and for pretty much all their history, Spanish football has always been sort of up there, certainly in the club scene. Real Madrid, Barcelona, the absolute powerhouses, by far two of the biggest clubs in the world, if not necessarily the biggest. And then, but yeah, it's not. And then there's several other big clubs in Spain, certainly in the community that are well known: Athletic Bilbao, Valencia, Sevilla. The list goes on. Spain, football in Spain is, it's the biggest sport in certainly in winter, and yeah, there's just an absolute massive sports culture. But so does every other country that claims football as its national sport, or has football as one of its top sports. But why is Spain so much better than those countries at times? Well, you've got to look. I guess you kind of have to look at the history of Spain. Obviously, Spain, many years ago, they were the first real colonizers of the world. As you know, the history. We're not going to give you a history lesson, but because Curse of Columbus, funded by the Spanish king, got to the Americas, starting a wave of colonization across Central and South America, and obvious spreading Spanish culture, consequently colonizing local people, and of course you have the African slave trade, which whilst is a dark part of history, it certainly is an very important part of history, in that the migration of peoples across to work on the farms, the mines that is in the Spanish colonies. They ultimately settled. They had their own children and grandchildren, and so you had what the Spanish domain was huge, and of course, eventually the likes of Argentina, Colombia, which was initially the Bolivar Republic, Argentina, Chile, and Mexico all eventually kind of sort of declared their independence from Spain. The Spanish connection's always been there. You've got, and it goes on to this very day. Argentinians, lots of Argentinians, Chileans, Ecuadorians, Peruvians, etc. from Central America, they always tend to go to Spain, whether they might end up, they're lucky enough they're at Barcelona, Real Madrid's academies, or they might just start at somewhere like Getafe or Recreativo Huelva to start their careers in Europe. It's simple because, you go to somewhere where, you can speak the language, the cultures are quite similar, and naturally, Spain will ultimately, many of them will choose to stay in Spain because, let's be honest, the standard of living in Spain is very good. It's a bit like Australians and New Zealanders, or doing their OE in England because of the language, mother country, and quite a number of them do end up staying there. It's just I guess for various reasons in terms of work opportunities, even the lifestyle. Sometimes it might be more suited to them. But yeah, and I guess while with the English, you have there's always been the option of the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Whereas for the Spanish, Spain's pretty much certainly the most developed Spanish-speaking country out of all the Spanish-speaking nations in Central and Latin America. And certainly socially, obviously thinking of the economic situations and in Latin and South America, Spain, by contrast, is pretty much like a stable oasis, and certainly, a good place to get a job, and also to raise children as well, and crime is also a lot lower. So naturally, yep, you have all these second generation Argentinians, Mexicans, Chileans. They end up staying there, and then and then they become naturalized Spanish citizens. And certainly in more recent times, of course, you're now thinking about the 1990s to 2000s, of course. Spain, of course, being one of the nearest countries to Africa, belongs with Italy, Greece, in terms of EU, because I'm not going to mention Turkey. It has become become a gateway for a lot of the latest generation of African, let's say, war refugees and migrants. They go through like Morocco. Morocco's really close to Spain, so they end up going through Morocco. They go on these boats, and Spain has been pretty open with its refugee policy, and a lot of them end up settling in Spain. They might go not being able to achieve the dream, or perhaps ultimately going to the UK or Germany, that sort of thing. So they end up settling in Spain. I think that the good example, you're thinking Nico and Inaki Williams' family. They weren't refugees, but they came from Ghana and they moved over, settled in Bilbao, and certainly the ethnic diversity in Spain has certainly worked in Spain's favor. Lamine Yamal as well, and I guess with modern football now, you see with the European, England, Germany, Italy, France, the reason why and the Dutch, I guess, and you should say, and speaking of the Dutch, they've always, in terms of the racial diversity, being able to attract, migrants from other countries to play for their country, it certainly has helped the game a lot, and it's also, it's a positive thing, gives them opportunities, and when other people see that, and it grows the game, and that's why those nations have become successful. I think, that it is just fact that and Spain certainly with a more liberal migrant policy, certainly, and being able to integrate people into its Spanish society, that has worked certainly not just in football but in all sorts of sports. So at the same time, though, there is a word of caution, and those old enough will know that it was never always like this for Spain. And in fact, for a long time, Spain were pretty much were a bit similar to England in that they kind of they always had the talent. I can think of the number of players good enough to win a World Cup, but just never even made it to the semi-finals of a major tournament in the years. So I'm thinking, there's from Real Madrid, Raúl, Morientes, Hierro, Pep Guardiola, Barcelona. You got Pep Guardiola as a player, Luis Enrique, and then you go even further back. Former Spanish coach Jose Camacho, Emiliano Butragueño from Real Madrid. These are all players who arguably if they were say German in the German national team, the French national team, they would have easily won a major tournament. And I guess the one thing was that until as late as the mid 2000s, Spanish football, the Spanish Federation was a bit of a mess. And that possibly comes down to another thing. Spain, you have to remember, Spain is, of course, it is a reluctant union of several states. Catalonia is obviously one of the most well-known ones that have always tried to separate. And then Madrid's Aragon. You've got the Basque region, which another region who wants to separate, Andalusia, etc. It has always been a messy and marriage of convenience. And for years, the Spanish Federation was sort of torn between, you have the the Real Madrid group, the Barcelona group, and there was sort of never unity to. There was not never really any harmony between the Real Madrid and Barcelona players, and then that sort of all changed in 2008. Aragonés came. There was a new generation. There was sort of, and then you had Luis Aragonés who figured out how to mesh the best of Spanish, and of course, at the same time, of course, there were a lot more foreigners playing for Barcelona and Real Madrid. A lot of the young Spanish players ended up starting to move to the Premier League, or so. Yeah, so that, I guess that took away the Real Madrid Barcelona animosity there, and yeah. 2008, Spain win their second European Championship. Of course, they won the first one back in the 1960s. And then, yeah, followed up in 2012. And of course, they won the World Cup in 2010, playing a style of football that is, some would say is arguably one of the best ever played. Certainly helps when you have someone like, likes of Xavi, Andres Iniesta, later on Sergio Busquets, and of course, you've got a great supporting cast in, Cesc Fabregas, all those players who, just, or would be amongst the world's elite players. But, like all great things, that had to come to an end. And certainly in 2014, we kind of saw the beginning of the end. Obviously, Xavi, Andres Iniesta, they got Andres Iniesta. They weren't never going to sustain for that long. 2014, they got thrashed 5-1 in their opening game against the Dutch, then lost a 2-0 loss to Chile, meant that the Spanish endured the reigning world champions curse, and it got knocked down in the first round. They did a couple. Busquets still hung around. There was a turnover of players, but they just never quite recreated the magic under Aragonés and Vicente Del Bosque. And there was issues with the politics around, with Spanish football, really rearing its ugly head. Fortunately, though, I guess, and this is the one thing that will probably keep Spanish football competitive and for a long time, is the fact that, you have the likes of La Masia, Real Madrid's academy, and other clubs as well that just continue to produce all these great footballers who end up in the Premier League. They might not necessarily end up playing for Barcelona, but just El Real Madrid, but they end up going overseas and becoming top footballers as well. I can think Rodri as well is a good example. Sort of kind of emerging out of nowhere, becomes one of the best, arguably, possibly the best midfielder in the world, one of the best players in the world. And the Spanish football treadmill, I guess you could say, is probably what, is a bit like the, Australia producing cricketers, New Zealand producing rugby players, and certainly more so than Brazil. I think you have to say Spain has probably overtaken Brazil as kind of the home of football globally. It is, the issues in Brazil have certainly kind of slowed down the number of quality players, and of course, I think right now Spain certainly leads the way as the number one footballing nation, of course. And if they win the Euro 2024 final, it will be their fourth title in a row, and absolutely deserved, because they played, they certainly play the best football. As many neutrals say, is the way it should be played. And, something with the likes of Lamine Yamal, they have someone who could really, Spain might finally have someone that is up there on the same pedestal as Pele, Maradona, Messi, Ronaldo. So, yeah. And that's why Spain is so good at football. And we have to also mention the women, of course, who are the world champions. And also, the men, what the men will be hoping to emulate. The women, of course, beat England in the 2023 World Cup final, and deservedly still playing a terrific football away with and also Aitana Bonmati, coming from that same La Masia school, along with Hermoso and Calvidente and a lot of that Spanish team. So, but yeah, so what are your thoughts on the Euro final this weekend? Is Spain really the best? If Spain wins this tournament, are they truly the best footballing nation in the world? And what makes Spain tick? So much more than so many other nations. I'd like to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, feel free to like and don't forget to subscribe.